clap in. Hey, welcome to the Fireside Tattoo Podcast, the official podcast of the Tattoo Improvement Network, where every single day we try to make really crappy tattooers mediocre tattooers.
Including myself.
Including Cole Pittman. Do we have a mission statement yet? If not, that's our, have you written one? I haven't. Let's call that our mission statement. We try to make, making crappy tattooers a little less crappy. You know why? Because, you think about people that, like, they lose 40 or 50 pounds in 1 month, and you're like, you're not going to keep that off. You can't lose all that weight at once. We can't make people that good at one time. You got to creep up on it, Get a little better. That way it sticks. Yeah. But today we stepped it up because we actually have a real good tattooer here today, not a mediocre one. We have Cole Pittman, and this is the first time we've met. We've been tattooing in the same town for quite a few years now.
Well, yeah. I mean, I've started in like mid 2012, I believe.
Okay.
So about 4.5 years. Is that right? Yeah.
Yeah. And we actually tried to line this interview up or this podcast up for probably a year.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah. I mean, not by tried. I mean, like, we shoot a message back and forth and like, nah, not right now.
I'm extremely hard to get in touch with.
Yeah. Well, that's what makes you a good tattooer, I guess.
Maybe. I don't know.
So we've been tattooing in the same town for a while now, and like I've said before, when we podcast with Memphis tattooers, we don't do it enough because we have a decent tattoo culture here. There are some
for sure.
There's some really good tattooers around, and I don't think we spend enough time. We run around a lot, and we podcast with whoever, but we don't focus enough on our local tattooers, and I think we should. So that's what we're doing now. Let me start with this. Whenever the reason that I first reached out to you is I don't know where I first came across your work. Probably because some people that used to work with me at Underground came over to Trilogy, and I probably first heard of you that way. Did you work with Tom Morse at all?
I did. Yeah. I worked. Well, while I was apprenticing, he was there, and then he'd left.
Okay.
Right about when I was kind of coming out of my apprenticeship.
I know exactly where I first heard of you. Do you know CTP, Chris Norman?
Yeah.
Okay.
I went to the same high school as he did.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So that's where I first heard of you. He brought up at some point that he knew someone that was tattooing at Trilogy and showed me your work. And the thing that stood out, we were just getting started with the podcast at that point, and you were maybe still in your apprenticeship or fresh out, and you already had a pretty recognizable style. You were already working in a pretty specific way. You were incorporating some of the geometry, a lot of black and gray and stuff like that. And we were just getting into the podcast at that point, and I remember thinking like, wow, he really kind of identified himself with something pretty quickly, or maybe he was already working that way and has just translated it to his tattooing.
Yeah, I mean, I was doing the artwork I was doing prior to tattooing was very geometric. It used all the isometric grids and a lot of the same pattern work that a lot of tattooers had been, using for a while. So, and I knew when I started tattooing and I came out of my apprenticeship, I was, I came to everything late. I came to art late. I came to tattooing later than I would have liked. And I was in just a really shitty place as far as financially. And I knew I needed to when I came out of my apprenticeship, I needed to be doing something other people weren't. And I'd already had the basics of that style and that process down. So I was like, well, this is something I'm interested in. Maybe I can kind of exploit that a little bit. So it was kind of I was already doing something that kind of leaned in that direction, and I needed to make money at the same time, and no one else was doing it. So
yeah, because that was pretty early on. I mean, of course, the geometry has kind of taken off a lot of the and use a decent amount of pointillism and stuff like that, and that's something that's become more and more popular over the last few years. But I feel like you were kind of on the front end of it, huh?
I don't know. I think you look at people like Zed Lahed and some of the European guys. Those guys have been doing it forever, and long before I had tattoos, long before I was even interested in doing tattoos. Someone showed me a magazine, and he had, I think he was on the cover of this magazine. They're like, check this guy's workout. And I hadn't seen anything like that at this point. And, you know, a lot of like Buddhist imagery and kind of like spiritual, you know, oriented stuff. And then I saw this YouTube video with him, and he looked like a old gutter punk, you know, just super intense kind of dude. And it's like not who you know, if you looked at the tattoo and then you see, you know, this guy's personality on camera it was really weird. And that like kind of, you know, made an impression on me. And, you know, as I got into tattooing and was leaning in that, you know, kind of a geometric, you know, direction, you know, that's kind of what I think put me on that path. So, and then of course there's people like, you know, Thomas Hooper and, you know, those guys, and seeing that work, I was like, you know, I think I could do something, you know, maybe not like this, but close to it as far as stylistically. And I just kind of went for it. Yeah.
What mediums were you working in beforehand?
Oh man, mainly graphite actually. When Trilogy got my portfolio, I think Babak had, you know, he was at Underground for a while. I'd been getting tattooed by Babak, and he let those guys know when they wanted an apprentice, like, hey, this guy's got a decent portfolio. It was all graphite, 100% graphite. And like I said, I was really strapped for cash at the time, and, you know, pencils and paper are easy to come by. And so that's kind of where my focus was. And I think that's leading into tattooing. That's, you know, where a lot of the black and gray came from. Color has always been my weak point, and what now I'm gravitating more towards, you know, color illustrative work than anything, just because it's that thing I feel like I have a good grasp on these other things, and now there's this thing that I really want that I don't have yet, and I think that's where my work is headed towards. So.
I noticed that I was flipping through some of your work earlier today, just trying to get an idea of what we might talk about tonight. Excuse me. And I noticed that you've moved towards kind of a pretty traditional approach, but a lot of very bold color, very smooth blends and things like that. Whereas I didn't think I had seen a lot of that from you a year or 2 years ago. Is that so? That's something you've started to move into recently.
You know, I work at a street shop, so you kind of need to be doing a little bit of everything. I don't know if I had a focus in that direction. And the longer I tattoo, the more about the history of tattooing that I read or come by, and the more tattooers that have been doing this for, you know, 20, 25 years that I, you know, talk to and kind of pick their brains, like the more I lean towards a traditional approach, I think. And, you know, I work at a street shop, and I like the idea that I'm fairly proficient in multiple styles. I think, especially with Instagram and, you know, social media now, everybody tries to push one thing and be like, well, this is me. This is my style. You know, I enjoy doing, you know, walk-ins just as much as I enjoy drawing a custom piece. And I like that, you know, having a bunch of stuff in rotation like that. So.
Yeah. Talk about that for a second, because you bring up a good point where people feel like, some people on the show have said that, you know, Instagram is your highlight reel, and you're always trying to put out what you want to people to think that you do all the time. As someone that came up and you had a pretty solid idea of, I already kind of draw this way, you know, Thomas Hooper's doing this, maybe I can get an in this way. Do you feel like people are limiting themselves, newer artists coming in, are they limiting themselves too early? Should they explore a little bit more? Or do you think it's important to kind of dive in, identify with something stylistically just to get your foot in the door and get consistent work?
You know, like I don't know how much I can comment on that. For me and the path that I'm on, I kind of told myself, like, hey, first 5 years of tattooing, explore, do everything that you can. And then after that, if there's something that you really want to pursue, then go for that. And right now I'm still having fun exploring. Like I said, I think I'll probably lean towards a more traditional approach long term. And, you know, there's something about the energy of working at a street shop as opposed to a custom shop that I just really appreciate. And, you know, part of, you know, keeping that traditional approach alive through, you know, like a street shop, just, you know, it sounds appealing to me. And
long term, does the street shop sound appealing to you?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think I do a lot of custom work. I'm booking out. about a month in the wintertime, a month and a half in the warmer months. But honestly, like I could just walk in and not have anything on my books, and I'd be just as happy, I think. So,
do you dislike the homework of it, or do you just like the spontaneity of
dude,
like,
I'm gonna draw no matter what. So it doesn't matter if it's an appointment or if I'm just drawing flash to, put on the wall or to have, just ready to go drawing. So like, it's not necessarily the homework of it. It's just, I think there's a different energy of showing up to the shop and just saying, someone coming in and being like, I want this, whatever it is, and saying like, yeah, I've got time, I can bust that out.
Yeah.
And yeah, I don't know. I don't really know what it is. It's hard to pinpoint.
Is that where is that what appeals to you about kind of a traditional approach to
I think so,
tattooing? Is
yeah.
like that it is something that you can put in quickly, solidly, proficiently, and move on?
Yeah, I mean, I would say I'm a fairly fast tattooer, and I like the approach of just a bold line, limiting your palette and not doing too many fades and just getting it done and making it look, really powerful, I guess.
Yeah.
Like that's like, I think when I think about what I want to out of a tattoo, I want it to be, I think about the two words are powerful and deliberate, and I don't think I've nailed either one of those necessarily, but that's like what I'm trying to work for. I like bold, fluid, solid lines. I like, just flat color fades. I think those are super legible. It has this kind of, pop feeling to it, and it's just, and you feel like you're kind of, I don't know, like you hear the phrase like, you're standing on the shoulders of giants. It's like but you do get that feeling of like, wow, I'm getting to touch this imagery that so many people have kind of laid this groundwork for me, and I'm getting to work with it, and that it feels special, I think. So
yeah. We were talking before we started podcasting about Jeff Ensminger, and he's over the last 3 or 4 years gone back to a super traditional approach, and when he was really on the forefront of that kind of new school, very like he was doing super crazy illustrative, beautiful blends and all these really muted, crazy tones and stuff. And then he went back and everything just got really flat and crazy. Like his flames look like these little like squigglies with red in them, and he got really graphic and bold. And I remember asking him like, what happened, man? I mean, you were doing this really delicate stuff, and then it just got like hit you in the face bold.
Yeah.
And he was like, man, my tattooing got so fancy that I just forgot what made me fall in love with tattooing to begin with. He was like, all the things that I loved about tattooing, I wasn't doing any of them anymore.
Yeah.
And I just felt like I wanted to get back to what drew me to the medium to begin with.
I think it's important. I think a lot of us, when we start tattooing, I know I did, we try to tattoo like we draw. And like when I was drawing, you have all this time to work on an image. You can go back, you can erase, you can hide things with complexity. And I think, on the skin, things need to be simple. Things need to be legible. You need to be able to see something from a distance. Just things get too complex too quick. And especially with black and gray, I was really putting so much detail and texture into black and gray, and and I'd go back and I'd just, think about, wow, I could really simplify this and it'd still be realistic, if I can just figure out how to capture the essence of something, and then I think jumping from black and gray realism back to like traditional stuff, it's like, that's all you're doing. A tiger head doesn't look like that. You know what I mean? It's got this weird, raw kind of crazy look, but it's a tiger head. You're capturing the essence of what that object is. It's got big teeth, mean looking eyes, some ears, and some fur and some stripes, and it's what it's like you're taking things, stripping it down to its core, and it becomes more powerful through doing that.
Yeah. And I think you hit on one of the most important points that you made is legibility, and especially longevity, over a period of time. And I wonder a lot about because tattoos are getting so fancy, and you talk about black and gray, and I've noticed the people. As a matter of fact, we did a show with Paul Booth a couple of months back, and I asked him about this with a lot of people that are obviously really influenced by his work that are getting so dark, like literally dark, black in the skin dark, where there's all this subtle, like smoky little things going on.
Sure.
And I can look at it, and I know that they pushed it and they pulled tricks on
One
Instagram.
sunburn away, man.
Yeah, man. I'm just like, dude, what is that gonna look like after a summer at Panama
Yeah.
City Beach? You know, like, who knows? Well, I know it's gonna look terrible.
Yeah.
It's and you're right. There's something to that, but there's got to be. That's just the line that we walk, because some people I know want to push. They don't want to just do traditional super clean stuff that you can see from across the room. They want something that draws you in and you have to look at for a while. But then you can go really far overboard, and I think a lot of people are going overboard with, especially like you're saying, with black and gray.
Yeah, I think as far as complexity and stuff like that goes, like as long as there's got to be a juxtaposition of like, if you're going to do a complex, hyper textured area, then maybe throw it against something that's super simple. So that way, like, say if if it's an animal or whatever, you're getting a nice silhouette of that animal and it still reads, and maybe cut out a little bit of the middle ground and get a lot of contrast. And but no, I've seen a lot of people going super, super, super dark to the point where it's it's like a black arm, with a couple lighter spots. And I mean, it's beautiful when you really look at it and you see it after it's done. But I just seeing some of my own work heal over time. And now that like I'm not even 5 years into it, and I'm seeing stuff I'd done that I was really stoked on in the beginning. I was like, man, I'm figuring this out, and I'm like, man, that healed like shit.
Yeah.
It's like there's all that work I put into it. I could have put an hour less of work, and it would probably have turned out better.
Yeah. Yeah. That's interesting. Sometimes you're pushing too far, and you could have really like, one thing I think we don't do a lot of in tattooing that painters and other fine artists really focus on is like squinting, stepping back, squinting, limiting the light reaching your eyeballs, and saying like, does that read? Do those larger shapes make any sense? Do they follow the contours of the body? Am I getting too caught up in like in details that you have to be that far away to notice them?
And I'm super guilty of it. Like there's been times where I've just noticed, like, I am literally this far away from someone's, tattoo. I'm like, I'm breathing in their, whatever's coming off their skin. I was like, this is fucking gross, dude. Like, but yeah, you do have to step back, and you're like, you get really caught up in those details. And I think that's just our nature as artists a lot of times. And, like, because before I was tattooing, the kind of artwork I was doing, which wasn't much, but it was way detailed and textured. And, it's taken me a long time to adapt to tattooing, even though I'd only been drawing maybe a couple years. All those habits that I had, as an artist, I kind of brought over into tattooing. And I think we tend to think of the body as a painting sometimes when it's not, and I feel like you really have to approach it differently. But,
yeah. I mean, in a number of ways, that's true. Back to some of the geometry, and you started off with a lot of that stuff. Talk a little bit about some of the struggles that you found in technically, like placing stencils, trying to keep shapes looking like they should look when you're putting them on such an imperfect surface. Did you find that you struggled with that early on? Do you still struggle with it now? Do you have any tips for people that are moving in that direction that want to?
I mean, I would say just don't think it looks okay. Really assess that stencil. Because once you start, there's no going back. It's not like an image where you can, see that, well, this isn't looking the way I want it to. Like maybe this, is warping too much, and I should have put, you can draw that little section in. Like with a lot of the geometric stuff, you're stuck. It's not like you're gonna be like, oh, well, I can take, like I've done tattoos to where maybe there's a crease in the stencil, right? And like it's so busy. And you're just like, fuck it, I got another appointment coming in a minute. I got to, get this done. Like I don't have much time. And like, so you kind of gloss over everything and you're like, yeah, this looks good. And then you get to that point and you're like, shit, what do I do now? And then you have to kind of marker it and like, like you can fake it and a little bit, but I would just say, really assess what you're doing with the stencil.
On the front end.
Yeah. And I've gotten to the point now where I'm, even with a lot of the geometric stuff, I know a lot of people, like if they're doing like a mandala or whatever across the shoulder cap and they need it to wrap around, I'll just draw those in now. Like I don't bother, making a stencil and cutting it out and making like like a cone stencil. Like I'll draw that kind of stuff in. Stuff like that that's on multiple planes of the body. It's not. It doesn't have to be as exact. Like it's gonna read if it reads. You know what I mean? Like if you can look at it and you're like, yeah, that's solid and that meets up the way it needs to, it's gonna be fine.
How much are you hand drawing at this point on the skin?
It depends. It just depends on what my week has. Because a lot of times I'm like heavy in the geometric stuff, and then sometimes I have like more imagery based tattoos, and I think if the body part demands it, then I'll draw. And then if I had a late night or whatever, and I'm just like, oh, this would be better if we just draw this on you. You know what I mean? Like
that's how I got so comfortable drawing on the skin. Procrastination, laziness.
Yeah, just you're like, oh shit, I've got I didn't think this was on my book today. I thought that was tomorrow. Like I can draw that on. So. Yeah, I think there's a lot of that in tattooing. A lot of people want to believe that we're really prepping and just toiling over their tattoo, and they'll call 2 weeks ahead of time, be like, "Oh yeah, can I come in and see my drawing?" Like, I'm upfront with people. I was like, I will be finishing your drawing when you're waiting in the lobby on me. Like, I don't do that because I'm procrastinating. I do it because there's 100 other people waiting for drawings before you, and I have to have a life and I have a family. So, I don't know.
We were talking before we started about gracias, about how we prep, how we draw, and you were talking about that you're kind of an insomniac and you get up at the wee hours in the morning. And are you an insomniac?
Occasional insomniac. Like I'll stay up some nights if I really toil over something, but for the most part, I'm in bed at a decent hour.
Oh, okay, you go to bed early. You just get up super early.
I just get up early. Just gotcha. Like I said, my wife she wakes up early, and it's if I'm on her schedule, it just makes everything easier for us. So I get up early and I'll draw.
You draw a lot early. It took me 30 plus years, 35, 38 years to realize that that I'm not as much of a night owl as I thought I was. I always thought that I liked to sit up and paint all night and draw all night. But really what I did is I just sat up and struggled all night and drank beer and did whatever and never really solved any problems. And then I started learning in the last few years that if I will just quit on it, go to bed, set my alarm an hour earlier, I will solve that problem within 10 minutes. Whatever I was struggling with, like the first few marks will fix it. And you were saying the same thing. Like you get up in the morning and you're able to really draw. You're clear-headed and able to draw easier. I wonder what that is.
I mean, for me, I'm super nervous. I'm super anxious. I get in my own head, a lot. And my wife and I were joking about this earlier. Like, she thinks I'm the best comedian in the world, but it's in the first 30 minutes that I wake up because I'm so loose. Like I don't have like the weight of the world and all the anxiety. Like, I'm me at my core, and like I'd like to start the day like that. And I think I'm fresh. I'm well rested. Like my brain's operating. Like I'm not thinking too hard yet. So it's like get the drawings done in that frame of mind, and I feel like everything works a lot better for me. And I don't, I hate pushing things back to the day of, but I work better that way.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, kind of, but at the end of the day, you're kind of carrying the baggage of the day. There's been a lot that's happened, and it's funny because so many artists, I think, consider themselves like night people. I think that's kind of like what we think of when we think of artists. Oh, they sit up all night and they sleep all day, and maybe I just thought that's what I was supposed to do for half of my life, and then it wasn't until I got old enough to realize I was sleepy.
Right. Yeah.
that I needed to set an alarm and get up. And I'm the same way, man. I get up, I draw in the mornings. Are you drawing on paper still, or are you drawing digitally?
It's funny you ask. I bought an iPad Pro this past week, and I've been doing. I mean, I've probably done 50 drawings in Procreate. Immediately. Once I got went through all the settings and kind of got everything where I wanted, and the trouble with. One of the reasons I wanted to move away from a lot of the geometric stuff is a lot of this seems to be going to the digital realm, and people are making, digital imagery that, goes, for their stencils, and they're getting large format. And I was like, I don't want to lose sight of drawing everything out by hand. And, I really had that in my head. And then, Mike Fight came in town, and, I had him do a tattoo, and I was talking to him.
Did he tattoo a trilogy?
He was at No Regrets.
No Regrets. Okay.
So I went to No Regrets, got tattooed, but he came over to Trilogy the day after. He was going back to Nashville, and he was going to do one more tattoo on a guy that worked at Trilogy. So he's like, I'll just come over there and do it and then head back to Nashville. But, we got to sit around and talk, and man, dude, he just had his iPad Pro, and he was just going through all these drawings, just, line drawing after line drawing after line drawing. I'm like, man, I'm a sucker for organization. And, to have all that organized that way and in one spot is like that alone appealed to me. But to be able to draw anywhere, there's something to be said for that. I don't have to have a flat surface and a light and have all my stuff out and my tracing paper and my, pencils and pens. It's all there, and I can just throw it in my lap and go for it.
Yeah, I held off for a while, and I've been drawing on the Cintiq Hybrid for I don't know, a year or two now, and honestly, I haven't opened a sketchbook since, and it's for that very reason, because it's so efficient. I can open it up, I can take a photo of someone, I can drop their arm into a layer, I can lay out my rough composition and shoot it over to them and say, this is the basic idea. What do you think about this? And if they're okay with that, that's generally the end of my drawing. I put that thing on my little easel next to my tattoo station. I break out markers and I draw it right on them.
Yeah.
And I do it that way. And it's and I know a lot of people are really using it far more efficiently and effectively than I am.
I barely scratched the surface of.
Yeah, but I love it. I absolutely love it. I first, we went, guys, when did we go to, the first time we went down to Atlanta to Russ Abbott's shop? It's been probably 2 years ago or something like that. And he had, he's the Wacom king or whatever, and he had it was before the 27 came out, but he had the 22-inch Cintiq on one end of his tattoo station, his tattoo room, and he had Apple TV hooked up to it. So he had on this robotic arm that he could turn it like this, and he could draw whatever, and then he could project it over to a secondary monitor that was on his station that had a robotic arm that he could pull out, so he could use that as reference. And I was just like, holy crap, it's like you're tattooing in the future, man. It's so cool. And I immediately went back and bought one.
Yeah, it's weird, man. The second I saw him using it, I was like, I knew it was going to cost an arm and a leg to get, but I was I'm going to have one by the end of the week. This is just, it's too good.
And you went with the big, and the new iPads are 13 inches, aren't they? They're pretty big. They're as big as the Cintiq that I have.
Okay.
I've got the travel Cintiq. It's okay. That.
I don't know. I'm not too familiar with anything. I just asked him, I texted him, I was like, what was it that you were using? And he, told me. So I was like, all right, I'm going to go out and do that.
Have you had any trouble getting used to the kind of ballpoint pen on marble feeling of it, or does it have a decent amount of tooth on the iPad?
I thought it was going to take, in Procreate, you can go in and streamline your, stroke plot and stuff like that. So it feels more slippery than paper, but
what does that mean? Streamline? Does that mean when you make a mark, it automatically kind of
it's not? It takes the jitteriness out of it. Right, so I thought I was going to have a hard time with it, but we're tattooers. You're having to pull really fluid, lines anyways. If you can do it on skin, you can do it on one of those. It took maybe 2 drawings before I was like, okay, I've got this. So, I like it a lot.
Do you think that's the way you'll move going forward?
Man, I really do. I spent $1,100. I got to, right?
Yeah. But that's in the grand scheme of things, that pays for itself so quickly.
Yeah, easy.
If you are you bringing people's photographs? Are you making photos of people's body in?
Yes. So that's the main reason I bought it. I was like, because I was thinking about what. I get really been out of shape how much paper and trash a tattoo shop produces, right? It bothers me to a certain degree when you see all that waste, and I've got maybe a $300 tattoo that's got a stack of reference this big, and now I'm just, instead of having the people print the images out, and be I'll take a picture of the part of body, the body they want it. If it's wedged in between other tattoos, it's even better. And if they have a picture they're working from, like, oh, this is my cat, I'll be like, all right, well, just send me the picture, and then I can, you lose quality when you print the picture out. You lose quality when you throw it on the light box, and you lose quality when you put, tracing paper over that picture. Having a digitized image where you don't lose any quality and you get to draw and kind of mark out like how you want to shade it right there, like you can't beat it.
Yeah, I agree. It's in some ways it's made it so easy. The only thing that I find myself constantly like the thing I question a lot is whether or not I'm oversimplifying by pulling imagery in. Like, you know what I mean? If I pull in, like, oh, I need to do a big crow that goes up her neck, and I find a photo of a crow that works perfectly. I'm like, well, that crow's perfect. I'm just going to drop him in and use that crow, and I just draw that crow. Used to, that wasn't an option. I didn't print. Like, I would pull something up on a screen and draw it. Now, all I have to do is, like, click, screenshot, put it on a layer, and use
Trace it out, yeah.
And I try my best. So the way that I justify doing that kind of stuff is that I'll trace it out on the Cintiq, and then I get it pretty rough in there, and then I'll set it out, and then I hand draw it on the person, and I try it, and I think in that translation it ends up being mine. You know what I mean?
Yeah. But like I think there's always going to be a certain amount of, like, if you're using a photograph of an actual crow, that I don't really have a problem necessarily with just using that. If it's perfect crow, it's a perfect crow. But I think at the same time, like, when do you ever find an image that's 100% perfect? You're always going to end up having to manipulate it somehow, and if you can get the gist of what you want out of it, I don't see a problem with it.
Yeah. I feel like if I'm not making my own marks each time, that I'm setting myself up for more challenges later down the road. It always comes back and bites me if I try to use an actual photograph.
Exactly.
It comes back at the end. I'm like, man, that's not the way I would have drawn that.
Yeah, I find myself tracing out the image, pulling the image away, and because you have the silhouette, you have its basic structure when you kind of make your initial line drawing, and then I'll manipulate that line drawing at times just to see, well, I need, say if it's this crow and this wing needs to be kind of altered a little bit, like I can go in and do that. And then, I'm not going to trace out an individual feathers or anything like that necessarily. So I'm going to go in, I'm going to smooth that out. I'm always finding a way to simplify whatever it is. So I feel like in that process, you kind of make it your own as well.
Yeah, definitely. So you were talking before we started about maybe trying to get a little more rural, traveling in to tattoo. Were you talking about traveling to tattoo more?
No, I mean, I would like to do that for sure. Like, that's one of the things that's, really setting in. Is like, you're not going to get better unless you're putting yourself around other tattooers. And there's a wealth of knowledge out there that you just, you're not necessarily going to get in your shop. Some of these guys have so much history, and it's wild. Mike Fight. Like, I just could, we were sitting on the back steps at the shop, and dude was just talking. He had story after story after story, and I was just like, man, this guy's got so much. Like, I need to travel and access more of this. I don't think I'll do that through conventions necessarily. I'd like to do a couple conventions just to do them.
Have you done many yet?
I haven't done any.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So, like I said, I'm a young tattooer. It's I get real nervous about my work, and and I'm a nervous individual, and being in an environment like that, tattooing just doesn't seem fun.
But I agree with that.
But I'd like to do it. I'd like to do a lot more guest spots, I think, and just do some traveling here in the future.
Yeah, I mean, having done a little bit of both, I think that the guest spots I really get a lot of value out of. Not that I've done a lot of them, but the ones that I've done, getting to look over people's shoulders and like spend a few days with a group of artists and watch them draw. I get a lot out of that. I kind of agree in that conventions, I always feel out of my element. I don't. if I'm tattooing a lot, I don't get to see what other people are doing. If I'm not tattooing a lot, I'm thinking, what's wrong with me? Why are all these people tattooing and I'm not?
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
right.
And you know, the lighting's always crappy. You can never get people in the right position. Nothing's where it's supposed to be.
Right.
So I got away from actually tattooing at conventions, and that's another reason why this is so awesome, because we can still go to conventions and set up and talk to artists and have the experience without having to tattoo. Inevitably, as soon as I sit down and start podcasting and I talk to 2 or 3 tattooers, I want to sit down and tattoo though. Like
Right.
I see everyone else working, I'm
It's
like,
hard.
man, I want to do a tattoo today.
Right. Yeah. You
So-
just get excited. I think that's part of being a tattooer. Like, I hope that excitement about, you know, seeing people tattoo or, you know, talking to other tattooers, like, I hope that never goes away. You know,
Yeah.
like, I hope I never get too burnt out on anything. Like, there is something, like, when you're watching somebody that's really, really good at what they do, and you're just like, shit, I got some work to do. You
Yeah.
know, like, I really, you know, it's like, if you're an artist, you can always be like, yeah, I'm gonna go home and I'm gonna spend this many hours in my studio. I'm gonna really hunker down. Like, I really need to work on stuff. Like, as a tattooer, you're just like, man, I really need to tattoo more. You know, it's
Yeah.
like you can only tattoo while you're at work. You know, or but yeah, watching people tattoo is really exciting for me.
Yeah, yeah. You know, I think as long as you're, well, you know, I don't know. I know tattooers that get burnt out on it. I know for several years, I worked in a rut and never got any better. I found a way that I worked that my clientele was happy with, and I just kept doing it and I never pushed myself. And I feel like that before I knew it, like the information age came around and all these new tattooers like, whoa, just zipped past me. And I was like, shit, I've been doing this forever. How are you so good?
Yeah.
It was because I wasn't working to get better. I was working to do what I had always done. And this show has helped me a lot to get out of that. And I know there are a lot of other tattooers that are still stuck in that rut and may end up stuck in it forever. But that's all just about your own like drive and attitude.
And I think you'll probably get, you know, I think anybody in any career is going to go through ups and downs like that. Like, there's going to be points where I'm just really questioning why am I doing this, you know, and then I'll find that spark that'll probably, you know, propel me forward.
Yeah.
But you know, like you said, you know, doing stuff like this, guest spots, getting out, like, that's the kind of stuff that's going to propel you.
Yeah. I mean, if you're watching other people do really cool things, and it's something that you're interested in, then it just makes you want to do those things, or do like how would I handle that? How could I incorporate that into what I do? You know, that's what's been so cool about this show. We've talked to so many, we've talked to rock star artists, and we've talked to artists that I'd never heard of. That these two guys would just wandered up and down a couple of convention floors and were like, oh, your portfolio looks good. Do you want to come sit in? And I don't know anything about the person. We sit down and we start having a conversation, and I learn a ton. You know, it's just like, you know, it's just all about, I guess, keeping. I mean, the way to stay entertained and engaged in this is by willing yourself to stay entertained and engaged, like making yourself look at new work, talk to different people, like you're saying, you know, do guest spots, do conventions. I think that's important. I think it's one of the greatest things about this medium, you know, about this job. So
yeah. And you also have, like, for me, like, another component that keeps me engaged would be, like, you have, like, the artistic part of tattooing, and then you have the technical portion.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like this, like, right and left brain kind of activity that you can kind of jump back and forth between. And, you know, I think that's, for me, that's really engaging. I like to look at tattooing as a craft. I like to look at, you know, like, the artistic, you know, people are like, oh, you know, you guys are such great artists. Like, I love what you're doing. This is, you know, it's so artistic. And it's like, well, you know, it's like what I'm doing now is not, you know,
right.
What I did before you got here is.
Yeah.
But I like to be able to jump back and forth, because you can get burnt out doing art and trying to be creative or trying to, you know, problem solve visually, and then you can switch gears and get into kind of the technical arena, and that's a lot of fun.
Yeah, that's always an interesting line to walk in. It's a nice it's a good exercise, because, you know, say that you're in the painting studio and you kind of you hit a wall, you're tired, you can take a break, you can go get a cup of coffee, grab a beer, come back. And in tattooing, there's, you know, the person sitting there, you know, like, you just got to work through that. And so if you're, you know, I find myself, I'm doing these marathon sittings now. I only do one tattoo a day, and it's a flat day rate. So so the longer that they're willing to sit, the better deal that they get, and they know that when they show up. So then I find myself challenged by, like, all right, I'm only 3 hours in, and man, I'm done with this tattoo today. I just don't want to do it anymore. But I've got to find a way to
grind through it.
Yeah. And it's got to be. I mean, and I can't just cheat my way through it, because then I'm gonna doing it again next sitting. You know, like I'm going to look at it and go like, well, I can see where I tapped out last time.
Yeah, you have to find a way to keep interested. And I think for me, part of that is like just telling people no. Like, I'm not going to, like, this is going to be a lot of work and I'm not going to stay engaged in it. You know, like you know, there's some things I like to challenge myself on, but there's some things I know it's just not for me. And it's like, if I'm going to tap out during the tattoo, then I don't, you know, like I want to be in it. You know, if you're going to pay $500-$600, you know, for a session, like, you deserve to have somebody that's really in it. And it's hard. It's hard sometimes.
Yeah, no doubt. So you said you're booking about a month or so right now. If people want to get tattooed, where do they go? Where do they see your work?
Like I said, I'm like an old dude at 30. Like, I just don't use a lot of social media. I don't have a Facebook.
You have an Instagram. I follow you.
I have an Instagram, and even I struggle with that. So, like, I get, you know, people direct message me. For some reason, my account, like, I can read some messages, and they disappear immediately. Like, if I click on them, they'll, you know. So I don't like to communicate through social media. I kind of keep it just at the shop, like, even like email. Like, some clients have my email, but people ask for it all the time. Like, dude, I could give you my email and we could try it this way, but it's just not going to work as efficiently as calling the shop or, you know, going up to the shop.
You let the front desk work for you, like
I do. Yeah,
no,
and
it keeps wrong with that.
You know, it keeps. You know, like I said, I'm booking out a month, and I'd love not to be. You know, I'd love to. You know, come into work and just have a bunch of drawings and just kind of, you know, first come, first serve. I'd keep certain days open for that purpose.
That's a good idea.
That way I have, like, a little bit of reprieve from, like, the workload. But, yeah, I mean, just contact the shop if you're out of town. Trilogy Tattoos. We have, you know, a Facebook page for the shop, and, you know, if you're out of town, you can contact us through the Facebook page.
Is it just trilogytattoos.com or Trilogy Tattoos Memphis or something? Surely there are a lot of Trilogy.
I should know this.
Just
we
Google
got a new
Trilogy
you'll
Memphis.
find it somehow.
If you want to see his work, it's Cole
_Pittman. Yeah.
Two T's or
yep,
one?
2 T's.
Yeah.
So.
But don't call him because he doesn't want to do any more tattoos.
Well,
just
you know,
walk in
just
and
show up.
Yeah.
You might get tattooed, you might not.
Man, thank you for taking
Absolutely,
the time.
man.
It was great
Thanks
to
for
meet
having
you.
me.
Great hanging out. Go to tattooimprovement.com, sign up for our newsletter, and we'll send you pictures of Scott's wiener. He's a Samoan. You're going to love him. Yep. Next week, or at the end of this week, we're actually headed to Hyperspace Studios to hang out with the one and only Guy Etchison. We're going to get some podcasting in and maybe some picture drawing. Not much else, though, because there's not shit up there except for his studio. I guess maybe a nature hike or something. I don't know. But anyway, stay tuned for that. And thank you guys, as always, for supporting what we do, and we'll see you next time. Good night.